Hello and welcome to New Fast Food. We've got a lot to talk about today, including a brand new chicken sandwich at KFC, the return of some popular burgers at Carls Jr and Hardee's, and is Chipotle adding drive-thrus? Let's get started. Now, KFC has had a lot of chicken sandwiches over the years, talking about things like the Double Down, the Chicken Littles, most recently the KFC Zinger, which came out about a year ago, and is actually no longer on the menu, so lasted less than a year. So now they've got a brand new chicken sandwich. They're calling it the Crispy Colonel, and it's quite a bit different than the other past chicken sandwiches. So the biggest difference is that it comes in 4 varieties. They've got the original, which just is the chicken, mayo, and pickle. And then it also comes in the 3 sauce flavors that they've been introducing over the last few years. So you can get the Crispy Colonel tossed in either the Nashville Hot, the Louisiana Gold, or the Smokey Mountain barbecue sauces. And this is pretty interesting. It makes it quite a bit different than even other restaurants' chicken sandwiches. Most other restaurants don't have a patty that's tossed in a sauce. Usually it's just spread on the bun. So this is a pretty big differentiator for the new Crispy Colonel. And I think it's a great idea. You know, KFC, like I said, they've been trying to get a leg up on the chicken sandwich market ever since they got passed up by Chick-fil-A in the chicken market, and they just can't seem to crack it. Well, here's something that not only is Chick-fil-A not doing, but pretty much no one else is doing, is these tossed chicken sandwiches in these different sauces. And you know, they've been introducing these sauces over the last few years. I was kind of wondering if they were building up to something, and they still may be building up to something bigger, but this would be something, you know, if this really takes off, and that was really their plan, was to build up to have a chicken sandwich line that had all these different flavors. I think that would be a pretty good sort of master plan that they've been concocting over the last few years. Now, it's worth noting that if you don't want the plain Crispy Colonel and you want one of these tossed versions, it's going to cost you. So, which is kind of unusual for a fast food restaurant to charge you for a version of a sandwich that comes with sauce. But they have the Crispy Colonel regular version. It's priced at $4. But then if you want one of the flavors, it's $4.50. So you'd pay an extra 50 cents to have it tossed in the sauce. And it doesn't stop there. So actually, it goes a little bit further. So you can get the regular Crispy Colonel in a $5 fill-up. So the $5 fill-up comes with a side, a drink, a cookie, and the sandwich, all for $5. Really good deal. A fantastic deal. But if you want the flavored version, it's going to be $6, and it's not going to come with a cookie. You pay an extra $1 for the sauce version of the combo, and it comes with less things than the regular version does. It's very peculiar how they've set up those prices. It seems to me that if the sauce sandwiches are going to cost an extra 50 cents, then you should be able to get them in some equivalent of the $5 fill-up for $5.50. It shouldn't cost you $6, and then they take away the cookie. That just makes absolutely no sense. But that's where the price coming out of the gate. So it just goes to show you that it does pay to sort of study the menus and try to see where the value lies. Even if there's not really much you can do about it, it's at least nice to know that the option is either pay less for the regular sandwich and you do get a cookie, or pay more for the sauce version and you don't get a cookie. So hopefully this Crispy Colonel lasts a little bit longer than the Zinger did. You know, the Zinger had a lot of unfortunate things going for it. First of all, it had the name, the Zinger, which, you know, implies that it's a spicy sandwich, but in fact, it wasn't a spicy sandwich. It was just a regular chicken sandwich. And then the way they marketed it, you know, the KFC Zinger, that name, is actually pretty well known in some other countries, but all of the advertising relied on you already knowing what the Zinger was and that it wasn't a spicy sandwich. So that whole thing was just flawed. And then they had the whole thing where they were sending it into space, which they sort of actually did. They sent it up in a weather balloon, which got into the stratosphere, which I get it. It's space, but it's not really space. It was more than I expected them to do anyways. So like I said, hopefully the Crispy Colonel does catch on. I do think it's an interesting take to have the sauces on the sandwiches. I don't think though that it needs the name, the Crispy Colonel. You know, every time they release a chicken sandwich, it's got to have, you know, sort of a catchy name. I don't think that it needs it. You know, I think that if they just called it the new chicken sandwich, and then show that it has all these flavors, I think that that's enough. I don't think it needs a catchy name. I don't think that Crispy Colonel is a particularly good name for it. It just brings to mind images of the extra crispy Colonel, Colonel character that was in the commercials a few years ago. I really think that a chicken sandwich doesn't need a name. I mean, look at Burger King just relaunched their chicken sandwiches. No catchy name for that. It's just the chicken sandwich, and it's doing quite well. All right, so next up we've got an interview with Jeff Jenkins in QSR Magazine. He's the Chief Marketing Officer for CKE, which of course owns Carls Jr and Hardee's. He sort of expanded on this concept that we already know about, how they're splitting up the brands of Carls Jr and Hardee's. Up until this point, we only knew that they were splitting up the advertising and the marketing campaigns. We really didn't know if they were going to start to have different food items or what was going to happen. So he comes out in this interview and he says that the restaurants are going to have completely different menus and completely different assets. And by assets, he means like the printed materials, like the posters, the ads in the store, stuff like that. One thing he also confirmed was, we had that first Hardee's commercial released last week, and it had the old Hardee's logo in it. So people were wondering, hey, is Hardee's going to bring back their old logo? And he says no. He says they're going to keep their current logo. You may see the old Hardee's logo around in different places from time to time, but it's not going to be their official logo. They're going to keep the Happy Star logo that they share with Carls Jr as their main logo. Now, then he does mention a couple of items that are going to be coming out later this year, and we start to see what the differences are going to be between Carls Jr and Hardee's. So starting with Hardee's, he says that they're bringing back the Memphis BBQ Burger, also known as their pulled pork burger. So the Memphis BBQ Burger was last available in 2012, so it's been quite a few years. They're going to bring it back just at Hardee's, and this is coming later this month. At the end of this month, they're going to be bringing back the Memphis BBQ Burger to Hardee's. Now Carls Jr is going to be bringing back the Pastrami Burger. So they last had the Pastrami Burger in 2006, and Carls Jr is going to be having that again, not at the end of this month, but actually later this summer. Carls Jr is going to have the Pastrami Burger, and then also a little bit sooner, Carls Jr is going to have the Jolly Rancher's Milkshake. So the Jolly Rancher's Milkshake was tested about 6 months ago down in Southern California. It apparently passed the test, and now will be rolled out company-wide to Carls Jr locations. Does not sound like Hardee's is going to get the Jolly Rancher's Milkshake. And then he goes on to explain the reasoning why they're splitting up the two brands, why they're going to have different marketing and different food items. And when you hear about it, it really makes you wonder why they didn't do this sooner. So he talks about the makeup of the different customer bases, and I talked about this last week, but basically Carls Jr is more of an urban customer. They are into things like nightclubs and video games and soccer, whereas Hardee's customer, they're more into like NASCAR and college basketball and fishing. But in my opinion, the most fascinating difference that he shared between the two restaurants it has to do with breakfast. So Carls Jr gets about 17% of their business from breakfast. That sounds reasonable enough. But then Hardee's gets 47% of their business from breakfast, which is absolutely incredible. That must by far be their biggest day part, because 47% of their business is breakfast. That only leaves 53% between lunch and dinner. So that means lunch and dinner are probably only about 25% a piece. And half of their business is coming from breakfast. That's really unbelievable. I'm shocked. I see Carls Jr and Hardee's as lunchtime, dinner time locations. I would never in a million years think that almost half of their business, at least in Hardee's, comes from breakfast. So when you just take that one piece into consideration, it's a wonder that they didn't split up the brands a long time ago. I mean, Hardee's should definitely be focusing on breakfast, whereas Carls Jr can focus on everything else. And actually, I'm quite surprised that this first difference that we're going to see, it has to do with Hardee's getting bringing back their Memphis BBQ Burger. But knowing what we know now, it's got to be just a matter of time before Hardee's starts coming out with brand new breakfast items. Alright, so next up, let's talk about Chipotle. Remember, their new CEO, Brian Nichols, used to be the CEO of Taco Bell, and he came over, and the expectation is he's going to turn around Chipotle, who's been kind of struggling in recent years, and he's going to do so with some of the experience that he gained from Taco Bell. And, you know, I've speculated in the past, you've heard me talk about the likelihood that they would probably add breakfast to their menu and probably start serving alcohol at more locations. They already serve it at some. So now we have billionaire Bill Ackerman, whose hedge fund owns about 10% of Chipotle. He was doing an interview this week, and he mentioned 4 things that he thought Chipotle could do to turn around their company, and we assume that since he owns 10% of Chipotle, basically, that he's got some insider knowledge, and that these are things that they are actually planning on doing. Now, nothing is official, of course. This is not an official announcement, but the 4 things that he mentioned were breakfast, longer hours, desserts, and drive-thrus. Now, these would all be very interesting additions to Chipotle. You know, first of all, breakfast. Chipotle has one location that serves breakfast right now, and it's in an airport. And so part of the rules about having a restaurant in that airport is that the airport requires you to offer breakfast. So at that location, they do offer breakfast burritos already. It'd be pretty easy for them to just take whatever they're doing at that airport and expand it nationwide, because it's already sort of been tested there for years. As far as desserts go, they started last year actually testing something called buñuelos, and they're sort of like cinnamon sugar tortilla chips. Nothing too exciting there, but that is likely what he's referring to when he says that they could expand into desserts. The expanded hours would be interesting. You know, Chipotle and actually all the fast food restaurants right now, their business is booming with this new segment of delivery orders, and a good portion of the delivery orders come, you know, late night. People are just craving something, they don't want to leave their house, and they just want to have something delivered. So by being open extended hours, they could, you know, probably see a large increase in their delivery business. And then there's drive-thrus. Chipotle has tried to stay away from drive-thrus. They've sort of tried to distance themselves from being a full-fledged fast food restaurant in the past, even though they are considered one, and so they haven't had drive-thrus. Well, they have had one. They are testing a drive-thru window in Ohio, and they don't even call it a drive-thru window. They call it a vehicular pickup window. But you know, the precedent is there. They've already tested drive-thru windows at this location in Ohio. So I think any of those 4 things would be fairly reliable ways for Chipotle to increase their revenue in a fairly short time period. In the drive-thrus, you know, I think that the one thing that's difficult about Chipotle in the drive-thru is the whole customization element to it. One of the ways they could mitigate that would be to make the drive-thru window sort of a mobile order pickup window, where there's no speaker. You can't order there at the drive-thru lane, but you put in your order on the mobile phone, and then when you get to the Chipotle, you just use the drive-thru window to pick up your order. I think that that's probably a more efficient way to go about a drive-thru for Chipotle, because you know, there's so many customization elements to Chipotle. It'd be, I think, a little bit difficult to implement the traditional speaker box pickup window. Same thing goes for like Subway or anyone else who has a highly customizable order. I think that transforming the drive-thru lane into a mobile order pickup lane would be a really great idea. And I'm going to leave you with this. This is something that I believe is just testing right now. There isn't any information about this anywhere, except for Justin of Fast Food Pit Stops featured it. It's the Popeyes Praline Waffle Tenders. So what they are is they're Popeyes chicken tenders, but they have sort of a sweet batter on them instead of the normal Popeyes batter, and then they come with this dipping sauce, this maple butter dipping sauce that has this kind of 2-pronged. It's got the maple butter dipping sauce on one side, and it's got the praline sprinkles on the other. So the idea is you take the chicken tender, you dip it first into the maple butter, and then you dip it into the praline sprinkles, and the sprinkles stick to the butter, and you have this sort of candy looking chicken tender. It actually looks pretty unique. It looks probably like it'd be a little bit too sweet for my palate. I prefer more of the savory, spicy elements, but although this does, he points out, it does have a spicy side to it. So there's you know, some spice to the maple butter, and a little bit of spice in the tender breading as well. So it's the Popeyes Praline Waffle Tenders. They do look good, despite being a little on the sweet side, and they are just looks like testing for now in the Denver, Colorado area. But that's enough out of me. Now it's up to you to continue the conversation down below. I want to know, what would you name the new chicken sandwich at KFC? Would you have a fun, creative name like the Crispy Colonel? Or would you just call it the chicken sandwich, straightforward, this is what it is, get it either plain or sauced, it's a chicken sandwich. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. I talk about fun stuff like this twice a week. Every Tuesday and Friday I release new videos, and you can watch more right now.